All right, welcome folks that are logging in. We're just going to give it another minute or so to let folks keep signing in. And Andrew, I'll do a real quick Zoom uh, procedural before I hand it over to you.
Okay.
All right, I'll start covering some of the opening stuff, and folks will continue to log in. Welcome everybody. My name is Harrison Top with the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, streaming at you live today from Hotchkiss, Colorado. Just a few quick notes. Please, if you have questions, try to log those in the Q&A feature, which is down below in the lower bar of the screen. You can put things in the chat or the Q&A, but it's going to be easier for us to manage the Q&A. So please put your questions in there. We will either pass the questions on during or after the presentation, or we'll invite you to unmute and ask the question, depending on how the flow goes and how much time we have. That's really the only big issue. You can use the raise hand function if you have a question, but we're asking you to please put most of that into the Q&A. This is being recorded. It will be available through Colorado Grain Chain. We can get a little bit of an update from Kim at the end about how to do that. Kim, do you have any updates, or you want to save that till the end?
Just a reminder that Grain School Course 3, which is Grains Build Community, along with the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and RMFU, begins April 1st. So we'd love if people will check it out and register, including a free forum on April 3rd. And I just typed the link into the chat. So hopefully people will check that out. And I'll also chat a little link about our YouTube that you can subscribe and follow for other free lessons like this. Thanks.
Great. Andrew, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Harrison. My name's Andrew Calabrese. I'm a professor at CU Boulder and also a board member of the Colorado Grain Chain. And it's a pleasure to introduce Todd Olander and Mike Myers. Todd is the owner of Olander Farms and Root Shoot Malting. And Mike Myers is Malt House Manager at Root Shoot Malting. And this is the first time that the Colorado Grain Chain has hosted a malt, someone who's called a maltster. That's the I guess the industry term. It's one that we use to refer to people who do the work that they do. Before we get started, we've had an awful, most of you are from Colorado, but some of you aren't, but I'm sure all of you are aware of the tragedy that happened on March 22nd here in Boulder, Colorado. It has struck all of us, you know, people who live in the town, people who work at the university, people who live anywhere in Colorado. And, you know, it's gotten a lot of national attention with renewed debates about what to do to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening in the future. So I thought it would be a good idea if we just observe a few moments of silence in memory of those whose lives were taken, and to honor the families and loved ones, other loved ones of the people we've lost. Okay, that's something we come with a heavy heart to a happier topic to talk with Todd and Mike now. It's just a pleasure to have you here. I asked if Todd and Mike could talk about what they do at Root Shoot and how they do it and why they do it. So I'm just gonna step aside and ask you guys to go ahead and get started, and I'll be here with a lot of questions to follow.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, just want to touch on the tragedy, I guess, just a little bit. It really hits home. My wife has actually attended Columbine during that time 22 years ago. And so it really strikes home. And I think people need to talk about it. And I wish there was some sort of solution to it. So hopefully there will be someday in the future. So anyhow, thanks again for having us. And hopefully this will be some educational and informational, some good information that will kind of fill you in on the world of malting and what we're doing here at Root Shoot Malting and Olander Farms. So we'll give you a kind of a brief history, and then we're actually going to give you a tour. Mikey will kind of run you through all the different steps. I'm not going to touch on the malting process too much, just kind of a little bit of an overview. So, I guess my family moved to Colorado in the late 1800s actually, and settled near Boulder, and so farming is really in our blood. They are from Swedish descent, and we were farmers over there and moved to the U.S. to just try to find a better place to live, because there were some problems going on at that time and kind of overpopulation and things like that. And so took a risk and moved out to Colorado, and we've been here ever since. So the land that the malt house is built on and that I grew up on, we've been on since 1929 with my great-great-grandparents. And then my father, Steve, took over the operation in 1978. And I've been working with him since I was born, pretty much. So going on about, I'm almost 40 years old, and I've been on the farm working probably since I was 10, or at least helping out at some point or another. So I feel like I've got a whole career under my belt, even though I'm fairly young. So I went to college at CSU, and never was going to return back to the farm. I was kind of burnt out with it. I didn't think that it's really what I wanted to do with my life. And I went and got a construction management degree, and I spent one summer away actually doing that job and working, and I missed it. So as soon as I graduated, after that internship, I came straight back to the farm, and I've been here ever since. And we've kind of evolved and changed over the last 15 years that I've been here, kind of going hand in hand with my dad operating, and decided to add this malt house to the operation. So I guess what is the operation right now, and what Olander Farms does is we farm about 1,500 acres of irrigated. Majority of that, probably 90% of that, is actually center pivot irrigation. And then we've also got about 300 acres of dry land. So primary crops are wheat, barley, rye, oats, corn, alfalfa, and we've actually planted some grass that we'll harvest for seed. My dad's always wanted to make sure that we're diversified as far as our operations go. So we've done a little bit of everything, it seems like. So we've continued to do custom harvesting for dairies, done some custom harvesting for ourselves. So mostly that was like corn silage and alfalfa. We've also had sweet corn in the past, where we'd sell directly to grocery stores. We actually helped harvest popcorn. We dabbled in the pickle industry for a while, which is small cucumbers. So lots of different things. My dad doesn't really fit the mold of a typical farmer of just kind of, this is how my dad did it, I'm going to continue to do it this way, or my grandpa did it that way. So I think I've kind of got that same gene in me that I like to be challenged. I like to try different things, and it just keeps it interesting, and it's fun. It's fun that way. So we're continuing to evolve as a company at Root Shoot, continuing to expand, and it's pretty exciting, and it's definitely a big challenge. So I guess the journey into malting started in 2015, where we actually started growing different types of barley. So in this region of Loveland, Berthoud area, Coors barley was really the only type of barley that was being grown in this area. Nobody else was really growing barley for any other reason because there wasn't a market for it. So we went on the search for different barley varieties. We got some out of Canada, North Dakota, and then also some that are out of France, which is Lima grain, which kind of some European varieties that we currently grow. So we grew 7 different 3-acre plots back in 2015. And then we ended up malting probably 5 of those. Everything grew really well. Everything performed really well too. We just came back to our customers and what they wanted. And that's really what we strive to do is meet our customers' needs and try to make sure that they're getting what they want. And even sometimes they don't even know what they want. So we bring them things and they're like, oh, this is great. So, I mean, we've been lucky finding some things that really work well for brewers. So kind of on the varieties of grain, we're growing some soft white wheat, Huffman, and that's not typically grown in Colorado. And that's usually just a lower protein wheat so that it works better for brewers. We're growing this Olander wheat, which is really something that's very specific to us and very rare. Olander is actually, Oland's Vet actually is the full name of it, but it's a wheat that was originated in Sweden on the island of Åland, and that's where our heritage comes from. So it's a really cool story that we found this wheat. We had a distiller come through that was from Denmark right when we first opened in 2016 and asked me if we knew about this wheat, and really intrigued me, and I wanted to get my hands on it. And it took me about 1.5 years to find some, and I finally found some that someone was growing in Washington and was working with the bread lab up there with Steve Jones. So pretty cool. So we ended up with 1,000 pounds of that, and then we increased it, grew 10 acres, and we're continually increasing it. And my goal is to really just only provide, that's going to be our only wheat that we offer. So it's the only thing that we malt. It's only raw wheat that we offer at all. I love the way that the plant grows. It's really interesting. It just it's pretty wild. It doesn't have, it doesn't perform like these modern wheats. So it's just cool. It has a lot deeper roots. I know all of you are probably pretty familiar with the ancient grains and what benefits they have. And I don't know if we'll ever find a barley variety that's going to work really well for malting that's an ancient grain, but we'll continually search and pretty much try anything because we like to experiment with different things.
Hey, Todd, we have a question about how you spell the name of that wheat.
It's O, and it has a little apostrophe on top of it, and Land, and then I think Veste, Oland's Vet.
All right.
Yeah, it's a really cool, unique flavor. It's really earthy. I don't know. If you were to eat that next to any sort of other red wheat, you'd be pretty amazed at it. And it's high protein. I think we are 15 or 16% protein. We malted a batch, and I think we're probably the only malt house in the world that's ever malted this wheat as well. So really cool. really excited about that. So kind of moving on to more of how we've evolved and how the malt house got started. So we wanted to, as a family, we wanted to, and as a business, we wanted to vertically integrate the farm. So a lot of times dealing with dairies and the commodity pricing and things, you don't have control over what you're going to get paid. You don't have control over anything really, as far as like what your income is going to be. So we saw the opportunity to stabilize our business, also get more of a profit off of the acreage that's available, which is another thing that's shrinking, and that's another big concern of ours. So we just wanted to add greater value to what we can grow in this area. So that's where the idea of the malt house came from. And growing up or not growing up, but going to college in Fort Collins and attending CSU, and spent the last like 17 years of my life living up there, and just being exposed to that industry and seeing how they've grown, and obviously drinking a lot of beer. We always, that was kind of in the background. We're like, well, the main ingredient is beer, and beer is barley, and there's just that one step that's missing is malting. So is this something that's viable? So we started going around and talking with brewers and asking if they would be interested in purchasing local grains, and if they thought that would be something that would fit their model as a brewery. And so got lots of great feedback, and we decided to do it, obviously. But we jumped in with both feet, and it's really morphed into something that we really didn't expect. We originally were trying to use an old barn on the property to house the malting equipment. And after conversations back and forth with the manufacturer in Germany, found out that our building wasn't nearly big enough to hold any of this malting equipment. So we just continually ran the numbers and tried to see what made sense for us. We knew it was going to take time to grow the business, but we had the mentality that if you build it, they will come. Field of dreams, I guess. And that was really not the case when we first started. When we opened our doors in August of 16, being able to produce 10 tons a week, we thought people were just going to knock down our doors and say, give me the malt. I really want that grain. And that wasn't the case at all. So Emily and I just hit the pavement and started talking with brewers. And it took us probably 6 to 8 months before we actually sold like 2,000 pounds probably. So it was a real big struggle. And we just thought that we'd made a really big mistake. So we finally got it into people's hands, and they had good success with it. And we actually hired a salesman because Emily and I just weren't getting the job done. And we thought that was something that somebody needed to focus all their time on sales. So we hired Dan, which is our first employee, and he hit the ground running and had some beer knowledge, and that really helped. And we had a fairly successful year in 2017. We were able to pay our bills, I guess. So that was a success for us. Continuing with that timeline, we were able to produce 10 tons at that point. And 2017 was a pretty good success. I had taken a course previously in Canada to learn how to malt. So I haven't talked about that at all. I took a 2-week course in Canada in April, which was about 3 months before the equipment actually showed up at our doorstep. So put your feet to the fire, learn how to malt in 3 months. So it was quite the challenge. There was lots of self-doubt, I guess, of like, how am I going to do this? And my brother actually attended the course with me in Canada, so we were able to kind of go back and forth and try to figure some things out, and really had pretty decent success on the malt quality too in the beginning. And then I still didn't think that I had a really good grasp on what was going on in malting. So I took another course in January of 2017. And that really helped solidify all the processes that are going on in malting. So I guess fast forward to 2019. 2018 was really successful. We made as much malt as we could, which is about 50 batches. It's pretty close to 1 million pounds of raw grain was used. And we couldn't keep up. And we actually ordered a second drum, and we installed that in February of 19. So that's where we sit currently. We can produce 20 tons of malt. And Mike will get into a lot of this equipment and show you guys around here in a moment. But I've got some pretty cool facts or statistics as far as the amount of grain that's used, the amount of beer that it actually can produce. So each batch of 10 tons or 20,000 pounds takes about 4 acres of barley. So currently that's about 400 acres that we need to have enough supply for the year. That one batch will make 180 barrels of beer, which is 5,580 gallons, which is 60,000 12-ounce beers. So every batch we make is 60,000 beers, which I was just figuring this out the other day, and I was like, wow, that is a lot of beer. But I mean, if you think about New Belgium or any of these large guys, they're running through a batch probably every day. So they're probably making 20,000 beers every day. And then every one of those 12-ounce beers is about a quarter pound of malt. So those are some pretty cool statistics on what we produce. Mike's going to get into the malting process here. I'll just give you the quick and dirty. There's 3 steps: steeping, which is just hydrating the grain and getting it ready to grow; germinating, which is about 120 hours. That's just controlling the temperature during germination, which we do with air, and that will be about 5 days worth. And then about 35 hours of kilning, which dries the grain back out to about 4%, and it stabilizes it and gets it ready for brewers. So I'm gonna hand it off to Mike, and I'll probably join him out there too, and show you what we're up to. Unless you guys want to go over some questions now about that process, or we can just kind of wait to the end.
I just have one right now. Todd, could you just say that step of those 3 steps of
Malting,
germinating, and then kilning it afterwards?
So steeping is the first one, which is the hydrating, and then germinating, and then kilning as well.
And that process is to bring out more flavor. And what else does it do for the brewing process?
Well, we're basically, the raw barley is just made up of mostly starch and protein. And so through the malting process, we're actually breaking down some of that starch and creating enzymes that once you add hot water, and these enzymes are going to create maltose and different sugars, and so the enzymes are going to break down the starch into sugar, is pretty much what we're creating in there. So all that sugar is the energy that helps a plant grow if you're planting it in a field. So we're using that energy, I guess, and we're controlling how much energy it's exerting by controlling the temperature and the germination. Is what the brewers are going to use to actually make the sugar waters in the brewing process. So we make the grain much more friable, which means it crushes easier. So if you were to try to eat raw grain, like raw barley, and try to bite down on it, it's going to really hurt your teeth. But if you take malt that's already been malted and try to eat it, it's much more easy. You can actually chew it, and it's not going to break a tooth or anything. And so we're really breaking down that hard starch and making it available to the enzymes once you add hot water to it. But Mike is going to touch on a lot of that. So we'll jump over to that if that works for everybody.
Hey, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Thanks for a moment of silence at the beginning. I'm a 17-year, I spent 17 years with King Soopers. That hits pretty close to home. So thanks for that. Really want to just kind of walk you through our facility and talk about some of the equipment, kind of what's going on here. There's a big draw is we have a state-of-the-art malting facility here in Colorado. And not very many people around the world ever get to see or experience a malting facility. So I'm just going to kind of walk you around, point at some stuff, talk to you about it. So these
Hey, Mike,
are, yep.
I'm sorry, we're still getting that feedback, man.
How about now? Better?
Better.
Okay, cool. All right, so here are the drums. So these drums are manufactured in Hamburg, Germany. Each one of these weigh 34,000 pounds empty. So this is where malting takes place. So we have germination and kilning take place in this vessel. So this is a dual purpose vessel for us. Drum number 1 was only the second one ever manufactured by Casper Schultz. The first one here to the United States. So when you're talking about the craft malt revolution, kind of like the craft beer revolution that's happening, we are literally on the forefront of what's going on in this industry. Our equipment really puts us to the top, helps us keeps our end product really consistent. So right here you have the steep tank, and we're actually steeping right now, which is, if you pick up a little bit of noise, it's probably from that. But the process is we load up 20,000 pounds of raw barley into the steep tank, and then we fill it up with water. We run some air through this, which creates like a boiling effect inside of the steep tank, which helps rinse the grains, make sure everything is really homogeneous. So it sits underwater for about 6 hours or so, just that first steep, and then we drain all the water out of this. Once all that water's drained, it's called an air rest. So we're basically just running air through the grain bed. What starts to happen is the grain starts to metabolize and starts to generate energy like it's growing. So what'll happen is you generate a lot of heat. So you can watch, there's a temperature probe here on the bottom end of this vessel. And you can actually watch the heat increase. So we start steeping at around 60 degrees, and by the end of steeping, it's generated enough energy that it's upwards of 90 degrees inside of this steeping vessel. Let's see if we can get a good look at it from up here. That's pretty good. So this is, you'll start to see it bubbling and moving around. So it's basically just mixing up the grains, and you can probably hear the fans kick on. There we go. We got some movement going. So basically, we're washing the grains right now. This is the first part of the process called steeping. You can see it kicking around now pretty good. So the next part of the process is the germination portion, which here's a look at the drum. So the drum sits on these rollers, and it has a big bike chain that surrounds it. So about every 12 hours in our process, the drums make about 4 or 5 rotations. It completely turns around. It's actually really silent when it happens. Super cool. But what happens is if you don't have a way to physically turn this barley over, it will start to grow onto itself. And so you would need to get a pickaxe to get the barley out of this vessel. just because it'll grow into about a 20,000 pound divot. So this is a look at inside the vessel on the top portion. So right now we have 20,000 pounds of germinating. This is Genie barley for us. So inside of this vessel, you have an auger, which helps us get the material in and out. And you have a sprinkler line that runs down the middle of this vessel. This sprinkler line allows us to put water directly onto the grain bed and help control the moisture content of the grain. So when raw barley is somewhere around 8-9% moisture. So we go from raw barley at 8%. So we hydrate it in the steep tank to about 40. And then we basically wet slurry pump all the water and grain out of the bottom of the vessel through these pipes into the drum. And so we're shooting for about somewhere around 45% moisture content of the grain while it's germinating. So once we get it to about 45%, we just kind of let it not free rise, but just drop on its own to get down to about 42 to 43 by the time it goes to the kilning process. So it'll sit in germination for about 5 days, where we're just kind of charting the growth of the acrospire of the grain. And here's a look at what the grain looks like in there right now. So you can start to see some rootlet growth. And we're really early in the process, so there isn't much acrospire growth on this that you can see. But it'll sit in here for about 5 days. And then it takes about anywhere from 24 to 32 hours to start kilning. And in this drum right now, we're actually kilning. So it's really hot inside of this vessel. So I think it's running at about 160 degrees right now, just blowing air through this to dry it out. So our input is 20,000 pounds of raw barley into the steep tank. We move it over here, hydrate it to 45%, and then we dry it out to somewhere between 3 and 5, kind of just depends on what we're doing. But we have some water weight loss. So we may input 20,000 pounds, but we're getting out like 18.5, somewhere around there. So there is just some loss in the malting process, which is pretty normal. So once it's done kilning, switch this around so you don't have to look at my face. So once it's done kilning, this drum rotates down on its head, and then it goes in, it starts emptying out into this trough down here, which is how we basically move everything around in this facility. So we have a closed chain disc conveyor system that runs through our facility, which is how we move things, which you can kind of get a look over here, see what it looks like. So this is what the chain disc conveyor is. So it's just a chain with a bunch of little plastic discs on it, runs in a loop, picks stuff up and just moves it around for us. So it takes about 3 hours to remove all the grain from the drum by the time it's done drying. And our equipment is really efficient. So you're talking, we input 20,000 pounds, and for waste, I have about a 5-gallon bucket that comes out of every batch. So super efficient on getting it in and out. Then what's really cool about this equipment is we have complete control over all the parameters inside of the drum. So air mixture, whether it's recirculated air or fresh air from outside. We have control over the humidity, the ability to add water onto the grain, how fast the fans are running to blow inside of the drum. So it helps us to make really super consistent malt batch after batch. We've just kind of fine-tuned the process over time. So we actually put our 300th batch in today, which is going on in the steep tank. So once we're done kilning, we come to our packaging side of our facility. So there's 3 silos, 1, 2, and 3 back there. So the finished malt comes into one of those silos and just kind of waits around until we're ready to go to packaging. So we run the same kind of chain disc conveyor system off the bottom of these. So if we input into drum 2 and we want to start bagging drum 2, just kind of open the slide gate up. Then we run it through a series of cleaning machines. So we have a shaker screen here. So we start to separate out some of the material. Then we also run it through an aspirator. So that's basically where air is blowing up from the bottom and you have grain falling in from the top, and it hits a series of waterfalls and just clips off all the rootlets. And then those are blown up and out and collected into our shaft material. We have the ability to mill grains for our customers. And then we also sell things by the super sack. So we weigh super sacks on this. And then the packaging side. So ideally we have one person working here, putting bags on, sewing them, one person here, putting them on pallets. I know this is the pallet wrapper, which is the greatest thing ever invented. Thank you. We have the ability to clean our own grains. So as we were looking at the growth of this facility and our operations, being in control of that aspect of our business was really important. So we decided to purchase cleaner and just take that out of somebody else's hands, put it in our own hands. So I know Todd touched on it a little bit earlier, but what makes this malting operation really unique is that we're vertically integrated. So once harvest happens, all that grain material comes here to the malt house, we store it, we clean it, we malt it, and we're our own distribution on those items. So it's truly not touching anybody's hands but our own. So we have full control over all aspects of our finished product. And this is a storage for outgoing orders. So right now we're producing about 14 different varieties of malted barley that range in color and flavor. And we do that all with just 2 base barleys. So we have Odyssey barley and Genie barley that we grow and malt here in this facility. And both of those are European lineage on that. We like them a lot because they have some dormancy that's kind of bred still in those grains. So, you know, your late summer rains, we're not having a bunch of sprouting out in the field, which helps for quality on down the line. And then I consider this a pretty low waste facility because we collect all our chaff material here and it goes out for feed to the cows. And then we are also able to reuse, reclaim some of the water that we use. So here's the chaff material. So our steeping water gets collected outside into a pond, and then we have the ability to put it back down on some a little parcel of land that's got some grass growing on it. I would take you outside, but my phone doesn't work out there, so you're just going to have to trust me that there's some grain bins out back. And I think that's the quick and dirty tour. Kick it back in here for Todd for maybe some Q&A.
All right.
Woo.
Sorry. I think somebody's here actually. Do we have any questions?
I have a bunch, but I don't want to prevent people who are attending to have their chance to. But I'll just ask one real fast. Do you guys malt any grains that you don't grow?
Well, we work with like 2 other farmers in in the Windsor area that we've worked with for a long time, doing other things as well. So they grow some barley for us, about I don't know, 150 acres. But majority of the grains that we malt are actually grown on our leased land or property. So
Cool.
yep.
We've got a couple of questions here in the chat. Bryce asks, what type of quality control testing are you doing on your malt varieties to ensure consistency and flavor profiles?
Well, it's a couple different types of testing we do. So we test our barley every year at harvest. So we're testing for protein level, moisture content, and also if you have DON or any aflatoxin or anything like that, which pretty much will reject all that barley if we have any sort of aflatoxin or DON, because it's detrimental in the brewing process, and it doesn't go away through the malting process or brewing process. So we're checking that as we put it into the bin, I guess, and then we work with Coors a little bit. They'll actually do some of the testing for us, but then we also send it to it was a beverage and food testing facility at Hartwick College, and Aaron McLeod is a very knowledgeable guy up there at Hartwick, and he's really helped out the craft malt industry by providing testing. There's now some more facilities that you can actually get to your raw grain tested at, and malt. So I know that CSU is working on having that availability, and then also Montana State. But Aaron was really the first person that was able to do some of that testing. So, and then as far as the malt quality goes, we send every batch also to Hartwick for analysis, but on the front end, we test for friability, and then we also do a hot steep, which is basically making a sugar tea or a wort tea, and that's really just tasting it from batch to batch and comparing it that way. Friability will tell us a lot too, which is how easily it breaks. So we have a friabilimeter, which is basically just like a grinder. So you put it in a grinder and it rotates in there for 8 minutes. And then whatever kernels that haven't actually been broken or gone through the screen, that tells you the percentage of friability. And so we're typically running 95 to 100. A lot of, I guess, some of the friability matrix that other breweries or maltsters go off of are a lot of times in the 80s. So we're running a pretty high friability, which helps out in the brewing process. So hopefully that answered that question.
Great, thanks. And then we have one more question in the chat right here, which is 14 different varieties of malted barley from 2 varieties. How do the differences manifest?
It's going to be mostly, well, some of it comes down to different grains. So we've got malted rye, malted oats, malted wheat, and then the malted Olander wheat. So that's like the variation there. But the other variation in just the barley varieties is going to be how we kiln it and how we and what temperatures we use to kiln. So in the kilning process, we can stew it, which is basically trying to get some saccharification going inside the kernel before we actually go to drying it down. And that is, I mean, that just helps with kind of the Maillard reaction inside the kernels when you start going to a regular kilning schedule. So a lot of it has to do with just what temperatures we use, if we use that stewing process, and how quickly we dry it out. So you can get some like bready notes and things like that, and you can also get some bitter chocolate notes too if you really crank up the heat.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions in the chat. Andrew, I turn it over to you to unleash.
get off of mute there. You mentioned, Todd, that craft malting, I can't remember if it was Mikey or you, that craft malting is the, you know, the equipment that you have and the process that you have is fairly unique or fairly cutting edge compared with what had been done at least in this country. And I was wondering if you could say more for people who don't have a lot of exposure to malting. I'm thinking from the perspective of bakers, just getting flour was okay until, you know, maybe a decade ago when everybody started realizing, oh, we could get different types of wheat. We could mill it locally, and you know, so that pre-baking process has become much more important to artisan bakers. And I'm sure that's the case with artisan brewers as well. And I was wondering if you could talk about your place among maltsters, you know, in terms of, you talked about this craft brewing industry. Can you say a little bit more about what that industry is like and how widespread it is and how important it is to brewers?
Sure. I think especially that we've, you know, entered into this time of the pandemic, you start having people looking at supply chain. So grocery stores all of a sudden don't have the right ingredients, don't have the supply, the suppliers can't make it. I mean, you have this breakdown. And so you also have people at home that are looking at more artisanal things, like all of a sudden canning became a big deal, and bread making. And, you know, you have people that are rediscovering some lost arts that aren't really, you know, you always go to the grocery store and bananas are there. What do you do when bananas aren't there? Like, if you know what I mean? Like, so you have this consumer driven look inward at what they're purchasing and what they're supporting. And that follows the line with, you know, brewers. So at one point there were thousands of breweries in America, and then it just dwindled down to the big folks that were producing, you know, mass-produced lagers. And you have this resurgence of your community-driven breweries. So like every town has a brewery, or every, you know, and so that is on its way back to where you're supporting the local people in your community. So I mean, the same thing goes with the malting. Like, this is relatively new, you know, feat that we're undertaking. Whereas you have the big malting companies I mean, they're gigantic. They produce more in one day than we can produce in an entire year. So there's the, you know, economy of scope that those guys can operate on compared to us. But what they've lost a little bit is some uniqueness. Their story is not as good as, you know, ours. Ours is pretty awesome, I must say. But, you know, you just have almost this coming back to why artisanal stuff is important, and it's important to people. So
yeah, just localizing everything, which has really not been our focus. Our focus has always been quality, but I think everyone has kind of realized that in the last year, the importance of this beer community, the importance of just community in general. Like, there's a lot of support that went into, like, beer drinkers going into their local place and going out of their way just to make sure that their local brewery stayed in business, and went and drove there and picked up to-go beers, and they knew they couldn't go inside and do the traditional gathering, I guess, and having conversation. But that support there trickles down to us, and we saw that with our brewers. Like, I don't think we lost any customers last year as far as them saying, I'm not going to pay that extra few cents to support you guys. So I think they kind of, there's a trickle down effect of, like, they were being supported by their community and they're supporting us as well. So it's pretty amazing industry to be involved in.
That's really cool. Can you, I don't know a lot about how distillers make use of malted grains compared with brewers. But do you work with distillers much? We've mainly talked about brewers, and I'd be interested in, I'm sure others would be as well, if there are differences in how you process grain for brewers versus distillers. Are there any differences, or, and be very interested in knowing what distillers and brewers you work with around the area.
I think the most interesting thing is we make brewer's malt, and we also make what's called distillers malt. So in distillers malt, a lot of distillers are using adjuncts such as corn or just other things to make their mash bill up. So distillers malt is kilned really low and slow. So the idea is that you're preserving all the enzymes inside of those grains so that the distillers can access those enzymes to so they can break down their other adjuncts that they're brewing with. So we make a malt that's distillers, and it's just low and slow. I mean, it tastes like grass. I would never put it in a beer, but the distillers use it for the high enzymatic capabilities of those grains. So we work with quite a few distillers, Breckenridge Distilleries being our biggest account. But I think from my vantage point, I think that craft spirit industry was kind of an undiscovered portion of our business. Like, we already grow corn. Well, heck, they make whiskey out of corn. That's weird. And then you have all the raw materials such as oats and wheat and rye. And then so as we have grown, we've also realized that has become an important offshoot of not only the farm, but our business as well.
Yeah. So distillers are using more raw grains than they are malted grains. So like Mikey said, they're using that high enzymatic malt to help break down the starch of these other raw grains. So we sell raw rye, raw corn, and some raw wheat to distilleries more than the breweries, obviously. Brewers are using all pretty much malted material. Distillers are kind of on the other side, where they're using more raw grains than anything else.
Uh-huh. So we don't have too much time left, but I wanted to ask you, for the sake of anybody who's interested in getting involved in malting, either as a hobby. I don't know if that's a hobby. It seems like a complicated hobby. But what are the biggest challenges that you would tell to someone who's thinking of getting involved as a maltster? And also, what do you consider some of the most gratifying aspects of the work?
Well, I mean, you can do it on a small scale, but it's difficult to get high quality out of that because you don't have a lot of control over it. So you'd just be kind of putting grain in water and then maybe trying to germinate it on like a cookie sheet or something, and then like baking it in the oven. I think that's a struggle. I started out doing that like on a very small scale, just trying to figure out what's happening in the grain and making sure that I had a decent idea of what was happening, but it doesn't really correlate to the larger equipment. So I think that's probably a challenge, is if you want to do it on your own. I mean, you can definitely, there's some people out there that can build some smaller scale stuff that's similar to this that have been able to make it work, and could be a hobby, I suppose. So
yeah, but even beyond hobby, I mean, what if someone listening wanted to maybe find out if it's actually viable to start a small business doing this? Not that you want too much competition, but
yeah, well, there's two courses that are offered in the North America. Yeah, so there's the Canadian course by the CMBTC, which is what I took. I think they offer a long course and a short course, at least they used to. And the short course is actually only like 3 days or something. So that's a good way of kind of getting your feet wet and getting an overview. I think there's a lot of people a lot of brewing people that would take that course just to have an idea of what's going on in the malting process. And then there's also another course that was offered by Hartwick. Actually, it kind of follows around the Maltsters convention every year. So it's offered in different places throughout the country each year. But those are two opportunities. I guess you can come bag up some things here, and we'll show you how everything works. We're always looking for people that are interested in what we're doing, and try to share that knowledge with people. It's changed a lot since 2015 as far as what information is available. Like, there was literally nothing out there now. Now, if you actually search for malt, there's a lot of things that pop up. There's 62 malt houses that are craft in the U.S. at this point, and the world. So I think maybe there's 72 in the world. So it's definitely emerged quite a bit in the last 5 years or 6 years.
I just spotted a couple of questions on the Q&A board here. And I'll go ahead and ask them, Harrison, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I was just about to launch in. So
oh, okay. Well, I'll do it. So Todd, this is partly you just answered, but I'll go ahead with the question anyway. Bryce has a question about the courses at universities. Are these types of courses the best way to gain this kind of advanced knowledge? Any other recommendations to get for somebody who wants to get the experience and the knowledge about malting? You taking on interns?
We'll take some interns. I would say, like, look around at your fermentation science programs through the universities. Like, Oregon has one, CSU has one. I mean, just look at those, and there's usually a malting aspect attached to it. And then even some of your large regional breweries are looking at their raw materials quite a bit. So that's another avenue there, is to look at your current operating breweries. I'm taking a course next week. It starts, and I think it's through North Dakota, and it's just a barley to beer course, which is pretty interesting. So
great. Well, the other question is from Michelle, and it's about seed cleaners. She wants to know what kind, what the brand is that you have, and how does it work? Does it have screens, fans, etc.? And how much can the cleaner process in 1 hour? Michelle, by the way, is a miller, so she has a lot of interest in seed cleaning as well. So.
So it's a Cambria cleaner, and it's a model 106 or something, and it's probably a little oversized for what we actually use it for, honestly. So our whole plan was to clean our own corn, but we've found out that it's really hard to get all the corn out of our conveyance that feeds the cleaner. So we don't do that. We actually outsource that still. But back to the cleaner, there is a top fan that kind of pulls on some of the lighter material for the first part of the cleaning. And there's a set of screens that takes off all the oversized pieces. Then there's another set of screens that will take out undersized things. And then another screen as well that's also taking out undersized kernels and weed seeds and things. And then there's a bottom aspiration fan, which is the very last step, which will actually elevate the grain. And then anything that's too light will be removed. And it cleans about, I don't know, 500 bushel an hour. So quite a lot. I don't know what that is that's about 20,000 pounds, 15,000 pounds an hour. So it's pretty big. So I wish that we actually had the ability to do some finer cleaning on a smaller scale. So we're just not set up for that.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm going to turn it back to Harrison, but just wanted to thank both of you for your time and for sharing your knowledge. And also, it was cool to hear you talk about the flow of relationships from the consumer to all the way up through to you guys, and all the processes in between you and somebody's beer sitting on a table. It's makes it a lot more complete to understand a little bit more about the malting process. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, this concludes our this week's episode of Colorado Grain Chain Homeschool. Thanks so much to y'all at Root Shoot Malting. I hope that everyone on this call gets a chance to try their product at some point, and even better, to see their farm. I was able to tour it last year, and have nothing but really fabulous things to say about what they're doing, both on the farm and in the malt house. So. So with that, we'll close today's meeting. Kim, do you want to promote one more time the upcoming events?
Sure. We have UCCS Grain School, which is all about baking, but also community connection and seed sovereignty, starting April 1st. We have also, I think, another grain homeschool coming up in April. All of that's on coloradograinchain.com. We would love if people looked into that. I've been frantically typing as everyone is talking today, and all those notes are only available for our members. And all of this programming is grant supported, but the Colorado Grain Chain is really supported through donations and memberships. So we encourage people like Todd Olander and others to join as business members or consumer members for $45 a year. So that supports our work, which is all volunteer led. I think that's all I got.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, Yins. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks.